All right.
Now it says meeting is now streaming live on
Live,
YouTube.
live from wherever Cheryl is. I love it. We
Somewhere
made it.
in the
We are
South.
rolling for part 3 of Keys to Monarch programming with the infamous and amazing and the fabulous Miss Beck. Welcome again.
Thank you. It's good to be welcomed again, and it's good to be streaming.
Yay, I know. And this time I really believe it happened. So I'm going to double check just in case, but I think it should be. Yeah, it's live now. All right. Unfortunately, it's not on the same thing, so it might take a second for people to find it, but hopefully they will. So we are back again. And like I was saying, I want to thank you because you took your storm and you turned it into something beautiful for other people. You went through all you went through, then you healed yourself, and then now here you are again helping people through this teaching of the Monarch program, so or programming. So tell us what your thoughts are on that one.
Well, I think it's my reasonable service to give back to the community, especially when we see the proliferation of Monarch everywhere you look now, especially if you have TVs in your house and you watch TV and watch movies, and especially if you see music videos of the day and the things going on in that, it's outright blatant. It's by the same formula still with the same symbology, and people have to understand that this has been decades of the same thing. Maybe expounded on, the terminology may change through the years, but you still have the same players controlling the world using the same system because it works.
Right.
That simple. Because they can, because it works. So um, the Green Mom speech, as we talked about in both, I think, part 1 and 2, when I finally got a hold of this and read it, it opened up the dark side of the moon programming side of my matrix, and immediately the code that it was used for me came spewing into my mind, and from there the memories just poured back, and it was crazy, the accuracy of the things that I was told by, of course, each altar inside telling me things, road directions in Maryland where I'd never been before, things like that. So it's mind blowing even now because I'm healed and because I had another 2 traumatic brain injuries since, I healed. When I pull up what I wrote, I can't even fathom how that came out of me, where to go in Baltimore, and how the programming chains worked and the matrix and everything else. It's like mind blowing. It's like somebody else did write that, because I can't recall it at all.
And isn't it, it's such a testament to our spirit and our soul that it's recording everything. Now, whether
I
we're conscious of it or not is another thing, but that's just
Yeah,
amazing to me.
I tend to think that my observer altar was probably more my spirit observing everything and keeping track of everything. Although they call themselves the observer, I think there was a lot spiritual going on with the dissociation. I believe now, that we were actually leaving our bodies with the dissociation. It wasn't just a mind, you know, kind of thing, because you're looking at it from the ceiling, hiding in the ceiling or hiding in the wall, things like that. And so yeah, God designed us so
Yeah.
perfectly, knowing that we're in an evil world and there's going to be trauma, and this is how a child's mind can cope without going crazy. and then heal later on when we're ready to deal with the level of trauma and get it out of us and have a happy life. So
Exactly. And for anyone that didn't see yesterday with Gina Phillips, I highly recommend you go look at it. You didn't see it
I
yet?
haven't seen it yet.
It's
No.
so good. She's amazing, but she also refers to, she has a video on her channel called Mind Control Overview that I think would, she says that she did the best job that she could to give people an overview. Because I was asking her, like, what if a pastor or somebody wanted to know more about it? What would be the best resource? And she had done that. And then I was telling her how you and I were going into our third part on you reading line for line the Greenbaum speech. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for the idea. It's a great idea.
It came to me a long time ago, and I thought, well, if I ever start my channel, that start a channel, but God hasn't called me to do that. Thank you.
You can just keep coming on mine.
Yeah, I'll keep coming on yours.
You have an open invite. And
Yeah.
so the next question I had for you is just one that somebody just asked in here, and they were saying, based on what you had just said, how can people spot mind control or monarch programming, or some of the keys to the programming, or what's going on in the Greenbaum speech in movies?
In movies?
Mm-hmm. Or TV?
Well, start with music videos instead, and learn the symbols in the music videos. I wouldn't recommend listening to the music at the same time you watch the music video, but look at the repetitive patterns of things. There'll be a lot of diamonds, gemstone type things. There's
I just saw one today. Sam Smith, I was just looking at it on Twitter, and he's wearing these Teletubby shoes. But if you look at his shirt, it's the Epstein temple color. So it's that blue and white stripe, blue and white striped. And then there's a child on the shirt, which is also quite creepy. And the child is wearing the stripes and eating a fruit, and it's disgusting. And that would be a perfect example of something that they're placing purposely in front of people.
Right. And they use gematria. They use repetitive symbols. A lot of gemstones, rubies, emeralds. Good movie that they use for programming, of course, is The Wizard of Oz. Phrases like the yellow brick road,
over the rainbow,
just wizards and warlocks and witches and munchkins. Think about the word munchkin just for a minute, and then leave it because it's bad. Oh
wow, that just dawned on me.
So these every Disney movie back in the day when I was in the 60s and 70s, so we're talking Cinderella, Snow White, that kind of things.
Red Riding Hood.
Excuse me, those kind of things, not that kind of things, but Red Riding Hood, they're all used in programming. So a lot of the classic symbols, taking a bite out of the apple goes back to the Garden of Eden, taking a bite out of the apple and the poison there. And
that's what was on Sam Smith's shirt as a kid, taking a bite out of, I don't know what kind of fruit it was.
Look at Microsoft computers taking a bite out of the apple, right? I mean, things like that are universal symbols will just start.
Okay, so bring it home. So let's say somebody has been programmed. They have no idea they've been programmed. They're watching these movies. They see the symbol. They're reacting to it. Now, how does that play out in the real world? Or possibly play out. Let's not say that it is. Let's say it's possibly doing it.
Okay, so that can make them become very dissociative, very vulnerable. They can get lost in their own life because it triggers them, and they'll lose time, maybe switch into an altar for a while, go buy things, come home, how this stuff get in my trunk, what are all these charges on my credit card if there's altars that are being triggered. And again, if you want to see how that works with real life things, watch the movie with Denzel Washington, The Manchurian Candidate, and how these symbols reinforce programming.
Got it.
Make it stronger and stronger. So they'll have, the trigger, they might spin in their programming, and it makes it tighter, so to speak. It makes those amnestic walls just a little bit thicker.
So that they don't have to go in for reprogramming like your dad used to.
Because they're always being reinforced. However, that being said, they will still break down in their programming, and it just depends on the person how often that happened. My father broke down when I was 6. He broke down again when I was 15. That was 9 years. Some people are 20 to 30 years.
Right.
It just depends too on if they're a sleeper versus, like, my father was an active operative.
Right.
My programming stayed intact until I was 30. So, I switched host altars when I was 15, became totally different, closer to my own personality than the previous one, but still not me. So I did that big switch when I was 15.
I like the real you, Cheryl.
I like the real me too.
So before we get started, why should we give everyone a warning?
Why should we give everyone a warning? Because if you have been programmed, there are keys in this that will trigger that programming in you, like it did me. When I read it, it opened up the whole side of programming that I wasn't aware of. I was aware of the satanic ritual abuse, was not aware of the government stuff.
Wow.
And so when I read this, and they got into the Greek alphabet stuff, then it came pouring
flooding back.
Yeah.
And so your suggestion for people who aren't sure or concerned is maybe to do this with someone, or a therapist or a trusted friend at church or something.
Well, somebody that knows about programming.
Okay.
So be it if you're already in therapy for things that just aren't right, which that started with me. First it was, I had so much missing time in my life. Something's not right. And then I had these abnormal phobias about things, and these repetitive nightmares with my subconscious trying to tell me what happened too. And then I remembered, my father first, and being, sexually abused by him. Mm-hmm. And when I got all through that in pastoral counseling, there I was for about 3 years, and then boom, my sister remembered an incident that happened when my mom was in the hospital having my baby sister.
Yeah, it's got to be like a tsunami, because it just kind of comes out of nowhere and makes it feel like you're drowning.
Yeah, that's how it was for me. We didn't have to work to get memories. They all flooded, and that was intentional. That's the way they programmed me, to be overwhelmed and commit suicide. So
you outsmarted them on every turn. Praise God.
Well, thank God for my therapist, who was always on call for me, and Dale and Ted, that I did the book with. Dale certainly knew programming inside and out, and Ted had personal experience with some trauma, and a girlfriend that he had dated before he got married was a multiple. So he learned from that situation. So I had a little team there ready for me once I got the boot, from the church. So
and now you're kind of like the lead girl helping people giving them ideas and ways to heal. Do you want to say, you had mentioned you wanted to say a prayer before we began or read scripture?
Well, for everybody out there, I've had a rough 2 weeks.
Poor Cheryl.
I've had a rough 2 weeks, and please forgive me for clearing my throat, getting over a sinus infection.
Feel free to drink as often as you like.
I got my hot lemon water with honey here.
I got my Olipop, so we're both ready to go.
So let's go to wonderful Psalms 37. Flip the page here. So Psalm 37 says, "Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. For they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. So shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thy heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass." You got a promise from God, and Satan comes in like he always comes in every single time, because it does the same thing over and over and over.
He's got no new moves.
He doesn't. And it seems like you get hit with all hell and a kitchen sink and a refrigerator and a freezer in your life. You're about ready for a breakthrough. Satan's obviously scared of what's going to happen. So hang in there with God. It says, "And he shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday. Rest in the Lord, and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass." So
That is good. I'm glad you read that. I don't know why. It makes me really happy.
yes, it makes me really happy.
I'm glad we started with that. Thank you. That was a very good idea. And it's funny too, because starting as soon as I get it scheduled, but I've got one of my friends, Milani Ismail, she's going to do the first reading with me, but I'm going to try and have different people come on and read scripture and share a testimony about that scripture. And it doesn't even have to be profound, just thoughts that the person has or things that they've experienced with God. And I just think there needs to be more living oracle and less Satan on the world.
Yeah, these
So you need to come back and be here just for scripture reading.
yes, to rest in the Lord, and his word is true. And when things get really wild and crazy, come back to that place, just hang out with Jesus and think about all the wonderful things that he has done in your life. Rehearse those wonderful things and know he'll do it again. And
awesome. I love it.
Just on his timing.
I love it. And so somebody said here, would a kid being petrified, scared of a stick like crazy be a sign that his dad is a high Mason?
A stick?
A stick. Like really scared of it.
Just any random stick or a special stick?
She didn't say, but maybe she's still here and maybe she can tell us. So Michelle, if you can hear me, let us know if it's a special kind of stick or just any stick. And then for anybody that wants to, if you scroll up in the chat, I put a link at the top there that is the PDF for the Greenbaum speech if you want to follow along with Cheryl. I don't know where she is, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we ended with somebody programmed at a future date to kill their therapist, and
okay.
in the room were really nervous about the threats and the things that altars will do to scare the living daylights out of them and scare them away. And as we said before, the late Valerie Wolf who helped my therapist know how to treat me, would got in a situation, and all altars are created to survive and do a specific job to survive. So all she had to do in threatening situations was to tell them they did a really good job at scaring her. You know, they looked really fierce and everything. Wouldn't you like to hand me the knife and go play like a regular child? Oh yeah, that's a great idea. You know, can we pull the marbles out or something, you know, and hand her the knife and, you know, let's go
It's
play.
done. Wow.
Mhm.
And so Michelle did answer. She said it was any stick, but what she was saying is no, her dad is a high up Mason. Um, wow. 21-year-old brother was killed this week. Crazy. I'm so sorry, Michelle.
Yes, me too. Pray for that.
And this is the insanity that we're trying to get ahead of with sharing this stuff. And it was one of the things that I asked Gina, and I thought it was amazing. She was saying that they always program you to believe it's worse than what it really is to go through those walls.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Which I thought was profound, because I think that it just showed. And I told her that, like, one of my favorite things I ever heard was some pastor's wife saying, all Satan is a mouse with a megaphone. And I thought that was so good, because it's so amplified compared to what's really there. Even people that I know that have been, you know, like personally, what's the word? I guess blackmailed. They just faced it, and it just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought it was not going to.
Right. You think too, the child is in such a state of fear and torture and all that when these altars are being created by them to survive. So that is part two of feeling that amplified fear. I can remember the first altar we started was the matron. And it was literally an internalized prison matron woman that was just horrible, right? Just horrific. She was actually my pediatrician's nurse from Germany.
Wow.
So, but it was this terrible voice inside, just really scary, and all this fear. And it turned out to be a 4-year-old in a blow-up matron suit, you know, just pretending to be the matron to keep us in line so we didn't get killed, because if we kept ourselves in line, then they didn't have to beat us on the outside. And, you know, that's normally why perpetrators are internalized like that, is so you preserve yourself from being beaten, killed, those kind of things. Let's go back to the stick. Children fixate on certain things when they're going through trauma. Say, okay, the child had been outside and maybe was raped, and they fixate on the sticks around them, dissociate and fixate on a stick.
That makes so much sense.
And so when they come out of that trauma, they may not know why they're afraid of sticks, but in that trauma, they fixated on that. So all sticks are danger. There's impending doom when there are sticks.
Sure.
So it doesn't, you know, I mean, that's I think what God has given me on this is that's what happened. They fixated on some sort of stick. And therefore, all sticks bring that feeling of impending doom and victimization, and the boogeyman's going to get me.
Right.
Kind of.
So it could be a stick that was used to hurt them, but it could also just be a stick that was in the room. It was just something that they happened to fixate on.
Or outside.
Okay.
Yeah. Or outside. You know,
that makes sense.
I had a phobia. What did I have phobias of? You know, black widow spiders, definitely. You know,
after your experience, yeah.
Right. After they made the spider bite me, and I just had this way out of proportion. Yeah, I'm not a girly girl as far as I do bugs and things like that, right? So no other spiders or things like that bother me. But you look at the phobias, and they're either something you fixated on or were traumatized with, and you follow that, and you will get to the trauma. And also, survivors have a knack for collecting things that reinforce their own trauma. And my collection.
So they've probably been taught to do that.
Yeah,
Or
probably.
programmed to do that.
Yeah, I collected Campbell's soup kit, Campbell's Kids, soup, little, cups and saucers and all these kind of things. And aren't Campbell's Kids wonderful? Well, that's what we were called when they were trying to change our genetics, was the Campbell's Kids. And it was a guy named Campbell. I can't recall off the top of my head who it was, but it was called Campbell's soup that they were injecting into us, trying to change our DNA. Here I was collecting Campbell's Kids. You'll find odd things like that with survivors too. There's this OCD compulsion, and again, that going back to the Denzel Washington movie, he's the same way. He's OCD about buying certain grocery items, and he's reinforcing his own programming when he does that.
I've never seen that movie, so I'll probably watch it tonight.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
It's a good movie. It shows it. It's not like they haven't told us what they're doing.
Well, when Carlisle and I first became aware of all that was going on, we looked up all of the, what would you call them, Illuminati programming or Illuminati movies, or I forget the name of it, but there's a list of all the ones that kind of show the stuff, but that one wasn't on the list. But we went through all of them and just watched, and then we were recognizing, what they were trying to do and what they were pre-programming into people. It was wild.
Yeah, there was one with Kristen Stewart and the Napoleon Dynamite guy. I never watched those shows or anything, but it was literally my MK Ultra,
experience.
Yeah, something, and it was supposed to be funny, but it was right out there. Here's these teenagers running around, and he's MK Ultra, and he immediately, like this lady asked him a coded question and he starts rattling off this stuff, and Kristen Stewart's looking at him like, where'd that come from? How would you know that? And yeah.
So do you remember the name of the movie?
No, I'll have to look it up.
Okay, well, when we find the name of the movie, we'll post it later in comments. I'll make a note so I don't forget. Movie, Kristen Stewart. That way I won't forget. Okay, so one more thing. Somebody was asking what Project Bluebird was, or Bluebird programming was, if you knew.
Project Bluebird was the umbrella that certain sections of MK Ultra fell under. It wasn't about the children. It was more about psychedelics and interrogation techniques, if I'm remembering correctly.
Sure, I know we put you on the spot.
Yeah, and we talked about Colin Ross before. He wrote a book called Bluebird. Mm-hmm. It's about the Project Bluebird section of MK Ultra. So basically, it's an umbrella over certain types of programming.
Use of drugs in particular.
Oh man, they were into their drugs. They were into
Truth
their
serum,
drugs.
LSD.
LSD. They continued threshold tolerance experiments that were done in the Nazi death camps. That's how my ears got fried. They wanted to see how much a toddler could take of sound intensity. And, they did it to the point where I went into convulsions. I was bleeding out my ears and that type of thing. And they blew, 40%, 50% of my hearing in both ears. But they made it, the injury when it was acute, I was 90% deaf. Wow. And I started talking like a deaf person. And I had to take speech therapy in kindergarten for people to understand me, and then was taught at that time I need
Well,
to
you do great. I would never
always,
know.
I
My
would,
daughter's deaf in one ear too, and you can't tell with her either.
I try to read lips along, the masks. Oh,
Yeah,
Charlie
that made it hard for her as well.
working with me, And you say, I'm sorry, I read lips. And what do the mask people do? They start screaming at you louder. And it's like, I don't have certain tones.
Right.
They're just fried, right? So
I have no idea what you're saying unless I can see your lips. Wow. Okay, so I just looked it up while you were chatting. It's American Ultra. Okay. And then somebody else asked what the name of the Denzel Washington was, and I think you said that was Manchurian
the
Candidate.
Manchurian Candidate. It's a remake of the old black and white Manchurian Candidate.
Okay, cool.
Just set in modern times.
Sure. All right. So are you ready to roll again?
Sure.
We got
All right.
scripture done. We've answered questions. Now we can get to work.
I love the questions, and y'all can always ask me questions over on Twitter too, and Carmen will put the link up there. So
yeah. Okay. Well, if you want another question, there is one more.
Okay.
Do you have any information on Jason Project Australia? Okay.
No.
Sorry, Joy, we don't have that.
There are a lot of Australian survivors out there talking, so try and find them.
All right. So what page were you? How many pages is yours? Because mine's 28 pages. I think ours are different.
I think mine was 19.
Okay. So then what page are you on? Mine's probably.
Oh, dear. Let me count.
Well, that's okay. If it doesn't have page numbers, you don't have to, because it won't help me anyway, because mine is a different PDF. I lost where you were last time, and then I never really figured it out again.
I'm about page 8 or 9 of 19.
8 and 9 of 19, so you're almost halfway through. So let me get to about halfway through. All right, let's see how that works.
And the top paragraph starts out abreactions, integrations, facilitating cooperation, art therapy. That's the top line. So the first word on that page is abreactions.
Okay.
Which I've explained.
I think mine's different, so it won't matter anyway. But you know what? I'm just going to focus in on you and let you read to me.
All right. Story time. No. All right, so this is Corey Hammond again, speaking to a room full of therapists. More than half of them use hypnotherapy. And when he's describing this, he is a hypnotherapist. I didn't go through that, and we talked about that's somebody's choice. But, whatever works. Now, one of the things that I would very carefully check is I would suggest that you ask the core. And the core, that's the first, what they call the alpha altar, the one that all the altars are created afterward. Not just the unconscious mind. Ask the core, is there any part inside that continues to have contact with people associated with the cult? Very important.
Such a great question.
It's very important for safety. It's very common that you will have a cult-allied altar, at least one, if not more, that report to them, that show up for rituals. When a car pulls up at 10 o'clock at night, they just automatically get in the car and go off and do it. So, yeah, it's a big safety issue with people, and they're not aware of it. So, yeah. Is there any part inside who goes to cult rituals or meetings? Is there a recording device inside of, and he's using a woman's name, Mary, for example, if that's the host's name, a recording device inside so that someone can find out the things that are said in sessions. This doesn't mean they're monitored. Many of them just simply have it. So they're having, an altar that will report everything that happened in therapy. Is there someone who debriefs some part inside for what happens in our therapy sessions? I have the very uncomfortable feeling from some past experience that when you look at this, you will find the large proportion of ritual abuse victims in this country are having their ongoing therapy monitored. I didn't have that because I was an expendable. My mother and my older sister both quit therapy real fast and never went through it. And I suspect that they were being monitored and reporting to somebody outside who said, "Oh, no, you don't. You stop right here." I remember a woman who came in about 24 years old, claimed her father was a Satanist. Her parents divorced when she was 6. After that, it would only when her father had visitation, and he would take her to rituals, sometimes up until age 15. She said, "I haven't gone to anything since I was 15. Her therapist believed this at face value. We sat in my office. We did a 2-hour inquiry using hypnosis. We found the programming present. In addition to that, we found that every therapy session was debriefed, and in fact, they had told her to get sick and not come to the appointment with me." So in other words, he had gone to a friend that's a therapist to help them in their session with this person. And because they had been monitoring, they knew that he was coming, and so she was supposed to play sick and not go. Another one had been told that I was cult. This is very, very common. Very, 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 very common. And that if she came, I would know that she'd been told not to come, and I would punish her. If anything meaningful comes out in a patient who's being monitored like that, from what I've learned thus far, they're tortured with electric shocks. Yes, that will happen. My belief is that they're in that situation, that if they're in that situation, you can't do meaningful therapy other than being supportive and caring and letting them know you care a lot and you'll be there to support them. But I wouldn't try to work with any kind of deep material or deprogramming with them, because I think it can do nothing but get them tortured and hurt unless they can get into a safe, secure inpatient unit for an extended period of time to do some of the work required. We're having a conversation about the hierarchy children that have been kidnapped and what happens when they're rescued. And that's going to be very intense to keep them safe when they're rescued and to do the therapy and not have things monitored. And we're talking a whole different level, like skiff, type situations, things like that, because I do think they're being rescued.
Wow.
I do believe it. And, they're going to really need to be safe for quite some time. So, I have a feeling that when you make inquiries, you're going to find that probably a greater than 50% of these patients, if their bloodline, meaning mother or dad or both involved, will be monitored on some ongoing basis. So if I had lived probably with the rest of my family and not been here in Arizona by myself, there would probably been a huge problem in getting healed, because like I said, they both quit, and they had one of the #1 therapists in the country working with them. So that's how powerful. And I'm, if people don't know, I'm from a bloodline family and did the SRA, MK Ultra stuff. All right. Now, when you come below the altars, so when you come below, what he's saying, come below the surface altars, the ones that are normally present, in the everyday life, it can seem like mood swings to some people, unless they're really blatant. Like my father went into a 5-year-old. It was
Whoa.
It's like, #1, he's a nice little 5-year-old, let's go swing on the swings and play, after just literally turning around after trying to kill me, choking me to death,
Was this towards the end of one of his breakdowns, like when it was breaking down?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was 15, that was going on. So when you get below the surface altars, you then have the alpha, beta, delta, theta, so on and so forth, the Greek letter programming. And then they will have backup programs. There will typically be an erasure code for the backups. There may be one code that combines all the backups into one, and then an erasure code for them. Simply one code that erases all the backups. So not only do you have that program, okay, let's say Omega Alter, but you're going to have, I call them fragments of that, where it's just their job is to reinforce that altar, and the Omega is taking yourself, out. So, you'll have fragments that will their only job is to, you need to do that. Yeah, and reinforce that. So to back it up. So if the primary one telling you to drive into a light pole, then there'll be an echo of like 100 of them saying, yes, you need to drive into a light pole, get it over with, blah, 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 right on down the line. Yeah, it is horrible. So after I've asked what will happen if I give this, I will give the code, and then I will say, what are you experiencing? They often describe computer whirring, things erasing, explosions inside, all sorts of interesting things. I've had some therapists come back and say, my Lord, I had never said anything about robots. And she said something about robots vaporizing. Remember, the altars were children. They are the ones creating this world inside in compliance with their narratives, that there's a robot inside. And so their erasure codes will be enacted, very childlike, simple things. The big boom went off, a big flash of light, and they were all gone. And you can have rockets and all kinds of things like that happen.
So
and
you not only hear it, you sometimes see it.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So that makes me wonder about schizophrenics. Do you ever think that some schizophrenics are just people who their programming went like really bad, and they're hearing and seeing things that aren't there right now, but were programmed in them? I mean, I don't know. Jerry Marzinski says it's the one thing that's in common with all of them is all of it's bad all of the time. Like it's never good, hallucinations.
Right. My father was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic his entire life. And they gave him the medications for a paranoid schizophrenic. They gave him 8 times the normal dose of a person to manage the paranoid schizophrenia. And it was never paranoid schizophrenia. It was, that he was multiple and programmed.
So it is possible.
Yes, it is highly possible, because most people with DID are misdiagnosed 8, 9, 10, umpteen number of times by someone because therapists don't go there.
Right.
They don't go there. They want some, and psychiatrists especially, they just want to hand you a pill and, you're fixed. And
well, you look at the commitment that Gina's had towards her clients and the people that she's worked with, and it's a very intense, long-term, constant, loving, building community. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not something you can go, oh, I'm going to be at the office tomorrow at 10. So when you start having these symptoms, make sure at 7 a.m. that you wait until 10 to call me. You know what I mean?
Right. I had different ways of telling my therapist what was going on. The best was email.
Right.
Sometimes the littles had to call him and leave a message, just because to them they called him Dr. Daddy, Dr. So-and-so, and because he made a tape for my littles. He read bedtime stories and made a tape for me that I could play, so when they got scared and everything, I could turn that on.
That's brilliant. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I would curl up in a rocking chair with my dolly and listen to his voice, and I would get through the panic of the little ones, and they could go to sleep knowing that he cared. And yeah, one of them asked him to do that, and he did. And like I said, God just put him right there for me, and I'm so grateful.
Me too.
Okay, so back to what Corey says. I remember one therapist who'd been with me in several hypnosis workshops and consulted with me about a crisis multiple personality disorder situation. I told her to inquire about alpha, beta, delta, theta. She did. She got back to me saying, yeah, I got an indication. It's there. What is it? I said, I'm going to tell you. Go back and inquire about some of this. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me repeat that. She said, what is it? I said, I'm not going to tell you.
Oh,
Go
yeah.
back and inquire about some of this. We set an appointment for a week or so hence. And she got back with me, and I asked what theta was, and she said psychic killers. I asked her what delta was, and she said killers. Okay, so I told her about some of this stuff for a 2-hour consult. And he mentioned this earlier in the speech, excuse me, the same concept. She called back and said, this seemed too fantastic. I heard this and I thought, has Corey been working too hard? She said, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but she said, I held you in high professional regard, but this just sounded so off in the twilight zone that I really thought, is he having a nervous breakdown or something? She said, but I respected you enough to ask about this. So the common thing I have heard all my life is, you're crazy. You're crazy. Your dad was crazy. The therapist is crazy. Everybody's crazy. So people can put their little walls of denial up and not have to deal with it. So that doesn't call me whatever you want. Call me crazy. Call me whatever. But I've been through it and I got through it and I healed. So
Well, and that's a credit to you, because basically what you've done is you don't have to have the validation from somebody on the outside that what you experienced was real.
And fortunately for me too, I did get the validation because I went and found it myself when I went back to California to prove to myself that I was crazy, right?
That's like those people that go out to prove that God doesn't exist and become Christians.
Right. And then, of course, when they were investigating my father, and then the CIA took him out, killed him. For everybody who doesn't know, they killed him, and so we couldn't go to court with the investigation. So then that morphed into the information in the book. And no, you can't get the book anymore. And no, I'm not putting it out again.
Yeah. Since you like the questions, we had somebody ask another question.
Okay.
Is it possible to have DID but not actually know or be aware that you have DID?
Yes. When you're in the midst of DID, especially because they start before the age of 6 with the programming, so you don't know anything is abnormal about your life, and you think that people do have these huge missing chunks of time, and there's something inherently wrong with you believe. So I've told this story to you many times where, I'd come back from being programmed and stuff over the weekend, and then have the electronic zap where they take all the short-term memories away. So I get back to school and not remember
any of it.
Where my classes were, where my locker was, what the locker combination was, and I'd go tripping up to the office, and they'd be, again, can't you keep this somewhere where you're going to remember it?
Yeah.
And
don't you think the people around you would be more likely to be aware something's off than maybe even you would be, if you're one of the people that don't know?
Well, when you're when you're in this, in such a city that I was, and the teachers are involved,
Everyone's
and
kind of in on it.
you know, people do pick and choose what they want to see and what they don't want to see with a child. Number one. Number two, yeah, I was always called a shy, morbid, hypochondriac child.
It's not the way I see you, just so you know.
I know. Be shy, right? You know, in the family dynamics, everybody's programmed.
True.
So,
True.
you know, you're not going to recognize anything. And then they also they also threaten people to keep their mouths shut. But it was so prevalent in Carlsbad, and it still is so prevalent in Carlsbad that, I mean, the teachers and the school board and the doctors and the church and, you know, it's just everything. So if they did notice it, they just thought, you know, what a weird child.
Or I don't want to get involved in this because I know this is, it's kind of like when you grow up in an area where there's like a lot of mafia. Everyone knows, but no one talks about it openly.
Especially in my era. So yeah. And there was a lot of mafia there too.
I believe it. All right, let's keep going.
Okay. She said, I asked another MPD patient and she didn't have any of this. So in this patient, she started describing things and how she worked. For example, with an erasure, she was describing things like robots, vaporizing and kinds of things. She said, I hadn't told her about any of these things. Well, here's the problem. There are different layers, and I think some of them are designed to keep us going in circles forever. He is right on in that point. They figured we probably, in most cases, wouldn't get below the altars which they purposefully created. So if you can imagine a roulette wheel, and you've got, let's just call it a smaller size one, and you've got surface altars. Then picture another roulette wheel underneath that, and another level under that. And it gets really complicated. That's what he's talking about with layers. They could be identical sexy Sadies, but they're a level lower in an older age.
Right.
So yes, they do design the programs to keep you going in a circle and never get anywhere too. The way you create Manchurian candidates is you divide the mind. It's part of what the intelligence community wanted to look at. If you're going to get an assassin, you're going to get somebody to go do something. You divide the mind. It fascinates me about cases like the assassination of Robert Kennedy, where Bernard Diamond, on examining Sirhan, found that he had total amnesia of the killing of Robert Kennedy, but under hypnosis could remember it. But despite suggestions that he would be able to consciously remember, could not remember a thing after he was out of hypnosis. I'd love to examine Sirhan, says Corey. And that's the big case right there, where this man was used as a Manchurian candidate patsy.
Yeah, I've heard RFK Jr. talk about it. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And was he really the one that shot him, or did the shots come from a nearby gun too? He was the patsy that took the fall. And you see a pattern of patsies in all kinds of big events. So anyhow, yeah, that's one to look at. That's a classic mind control programming right there. It appears that below we've got some other layers. One is called green programming. It appears, isn't it interesting that the doctor's name is Dr. Green? One of the questions, in a way that does not contaminate, is after I've identified some of this stuff, is where is there? And they've given me a few right answers about what some of it is. Yes, if there were a doctor associated with his programming and his name were a color, you know, like Dr. Chartreuse or something, if his name were a color, what color would the color be?
Right.
And I read that paragraph when I was reading it for the first time, and immediately Dr. Green came to my mind, you know.
And how
Now,
many of the colors would you suspect actually are? So, like if somebody said Dr. Blue or Dr. Purple, or you know what I mean? I would imagine more than just green would would be legitimate, because I know military people that would say brown.
yes, brown, black, and white are the most common.
Okay, green, brown, black, white.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Because those are, again, they're common surnames too, brown,
sure.
black, and white. So and
You get away with it. Yeah.
so yeah, and like I said, in my experience, Mengele went by Dr. Black for me, but he went by Dr. Green or Green Bomb for others, and they do interchange their names just to keep the confusion. So we never get down to these levels and heal. Okay. Now, once in a while, I've had some other colors mentioned in about 3 or 4 patients that I felt were trying to dissimulate in some way, and I don't really believe had this. In one case, I got another color, and I found out later it was a doctor whose name was a color who was being trained by Dr. Green almost 30 years ago, and he supervised part of the programming of this woman under this doctor. I remember one woman couldn't come up with anything. No altar would speak. I said, okay, and we went on to some other material. About 2 minutes later, she said, oh, Green, do you mean Dr. Green? So there's always a resistance to hit this level. There appears to be some green programming below that, and I suspect when you get down to fewer and more central programs, the deeper you go. Well, all green programming is ultra green and the green tree. Kabbalistic mysticism is mixed into all this. If you're going to work with this, you need to pick up a couple of books on the Kabbalah. One is by a man named Dion Fortune, called Kabbalah with a Q, Dion Fortune. Another is by Ann Huffer-Heller, and it's called The Kabbalah. I knew nothing about the Kabbalah. It was interesting. A patient had sat in my waiting area, got there considerably early, and drew a detailed, multicolored Kabbalistic tree over 2 years ago. It took me 2 months to figure out what it was. Finally, showing it to somebody else who said, you know, that looks an awful lot like the Kabbalah tree, and that rang a bell with some esoteric in an old book that I dug out. That was the background of Dr. Green. So the background, he's talking about the Dr. Green, that was the Jewish mystic Kabbalah that came over with the Nazis, Dr. Greenbaum. That was his history. And
Wow.
so that's why
also, I don't know if you have seen this, but I loved it. Dan Duvall did, I think it's a 12-part series on his channel. It's, if you go to his playlist, and it is all about the Kabbalah tree. And the only reason he did it was kind of an interesting story, because he said people kept bringing it to him, like, you know, this is a problem, this is a problem. And finally he's like, okay, we're gonna go through this whole thing. And he kind of debunks it in a way. Have you seen it by any chance? No, it's good. At least I think so. You know,
yeah.
My ignorance could be dangerous.
So he debunks what, the programming with the Kabbalah?
No, just I'm trying to remember what it was. He was basically, yeah, I don't remember, to be honest, but he does a great job of explaining what it is and how it works.
Okay. Yeah, I know at one time I had that information in me. Like I said, I've had a couple brain injuries since, you know, I did all my research and everything, but it was part of the Rosicrucian
Interesting.
Yeah, that the international one that the Bloodline, you know, they did a lot of Kabbalistic stuff. So that I had specific parts. Again, I'm an expendable, so I didn't learn the religion. They didn't
Right.
teach me because I was supposed to die. So they didn't teach me all their secrets and things. I
Right.
just,
It's wild how in a lot of ways that probably saved you.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. And that I get left alone still. Definitely. So there, you know, God, God redeemed that in a great way. Um, that they're just not interested in me for that, which is great.
So
Now, go ahead.
another person had a question. Another question, why out of nowhere would my hubby, who was in the British Army 12 years, Queen's Royal Hussar Regiment, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, got the exact Kabbalah tree tattooed on him and he didn't know why?
Because he's programmed. He
Yeah.
doesn't know why. Again, it's that OCD component. I got to get this. I got to get this. And they have no idea why.
Right, that's what you were saying earlier about the thing in Maryland.
Yeah. And, you know, the Campbell's kids with me. I had to collect the Campbell's kids. Oh, you know, I had to collect it and collect it. And when I remembered that that was the soup, they called it soup, you know, for the kids, and they'd inject it into our spine, you know, to change our DNA. They inject it into the epidural space, like when you have an
Like you
epidural.
haven't, oh, well,
Yeah.
gives me the
And
willies.
they thought that if they did that enough times, it would change our DNA. And they told me, you know, I always remembered this, that it's the DNA of the forefathers, which was Nazis. You know? So it's like, oh, great. You know, and I guess my eyes are supposed to change blue, you know, and my arm's going to automatically go up.
Wow. It is crazy how it all goes back to that same, all the same root.
The bloodline stuff. It's just all the bloodline stuff because I'm O positive. I wasn't a, you know, he married my mom, I think, for her, you know, O negative, among other things. And because they don't keep their bloodlines clean because they're so promiscuously perverted. Let me just say that. So there was, you know, there was a 1 in 4 chance that he would have a baby that was O negative, and that would be superb, right? So
That would have been a hierarchy child.
yeah, the problem was my mom being O negative and him being O positive, the ROGAM, the RH factor, my mom miscarried those babies
Oh,
because of
interesting.
yeah, people say, well, how did you know, how did you know that they were boys that your mom miscarried, you know, that she could carry boys? And it's like, I'm not talking about an early on miscarriage, you know, that it was identifiable that she miscarried boys,
Sure,
you
sure.
know, and if they had done a blood test, it would have been, you know, an O negative baby because my sisters and I are all O positive. So
And so what's the RH negative thing?
the bloodline of Cain.
Oh, ooh.
Yeah, they believe that Lucifer was the father of Cain, Cain and Abel. You know, that it wasn't an apple she bit into, but she had, you know, intercourse with Satan, and the O negative, AB negative, anything negative then is the seed of Cain. So they're Canaanites. And
So do
that,
you believe that that's true? Or do you believe that they started that rumor? Or like, what's your opinion on it? Because that seems wild to me.
well, when you read the Bible in that section,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of seems more like a possibility. So it is one of these things where what did they cover up in the Bible? You know, do I believe in the inherent word of God? Yes, in its pure form. Yes, absolutely. Jesus is the word of God, period.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the language is such that it seems like the boys did have different, you know, Cain killed Abel, right? And it seems like they did have a different father. And in the
Well, it's
wording,
also interesting because it makes you think back to what they were bringing in too. Oh well, we could get off.
we
Let's
could
stay
get
on the speech.
way
Sorry.
off on that. Yeah. But certainly I can say this. They certainly absolutely 100% believe that.
Okay, they believe it.
They believe that, and that's why they worship Lucifer, you know? So they believe they're
And the
kings.
bloodline.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
Okay.
we're the human bloodline, and they're the you know, the Canaanite bloodline of Lucifer. So, yeah. All right, so we're on the page for it. This is the top of the page for me. Now, the interesting thing about the green tree is his original name was Green Baum, and in German, Baum is a tree, so green tree, altar tree, and the green tree. I've also had patients who didn't appear to know that his original name was Greenbaum. I didn't have that in me at all. It was just Dr. Green. Volunteered that there were parts inside named Mr. Greenbaum rather than Dr. Mr. Greenbaum. Now let me give you some information about parts inside that may be helpful to you if you're going to inquire about these things, because my experience is one part will give you some information and either run dry or get defensive or scared and stop. And he's talking about altars. You know, parts are altars. And so you punt and you make an end run and you come around the other direction. You find another part or altar. I'll tell you several parts to ask for and ask if there's a part by this name. And by the way, when I'm screening patients and fiddling around with this, I throw in a bunch of spurious ones and ask, is there a part inside by this name, by that name, as a check on whether or not it appears genuine.
Smart.
Because there are, you know, altars that also just want to people please. Or there's the gamma parts that want to deflect and keep them going in a circle. For example, in addition to the core, I asked, is there a part inside named wisdom? Wisdom is a part of the Kabbalistic tree. Wisdom, I've often found, will be helpful and give you a lot of information. Is there a part inside named Diana? I mean, I may throw in all sorts of things. Is there a part inside named Zelda? I've never encountered one yet, just to see what kind of answers we get. I try to do this carefully. Diana is a part that in the Kabbalistic system is associated with a part called the foundation. You will be fascinated to know that. Remember the Process Church? Roman Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, was killed by the Manson family who were associated with the Process Church. A lot of prominent people in Hollywood were associated, and then they went underground, the book says. In about 78 and vanished. Well, they're alive and well in southern Utah. We have a thick file in the Utah Department of Public Safety documenting that they moved to southern Utah, north of Monument Valley, bought a movie ranch in the desert, renovated it, expanded it, built a bunch of buildings there, carefully monitored so that very few people go out of there and no one can get in, and then they changed their name. I'm watching, there's a person on Twitter, she goes by Dana Duda on Twitter, and she's delving in. She just finished a video on the Undercover Process Church in Utah, and it's hooked in with Scientology, which is again a military intelligence born cult. Just like Jim Jones, but Scientology, and L. Ron Hubbard, who was one of my perpetrators.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah, I was trafficked to him. So it was interesting when Leah Remini first came out and did her documentary, right? I'm watching this, okay, and they show pictures of him, and I'm like climbing the walls backwards, like, you know, I knew he was one of my perpetrators, right? But every time I see his face and his creepy tobacco stained, you know, lip there with the rotten teeth, just I can't look at his picture. So I'm watching this documentary, and they're showing people going in to, to be introduced, and they're holding the little handles of their audit machine, right? And they're, guess what? Guess who I see in that video? Me as a teenager.
Oh my gosh.
Me
Holy.
as a teenager.
Whoa.
And I have no memory of being taken up to the LA Scientology place. And there I am when I was very, very anorexic. And I was just like freeze frame, I'm just like, I'm looking at it and I'm like.
So while you're looking at it, this is post you healing though.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, I'm just watching this because she's exposing Scientology and everything, and, I froze the TV and I'm just studying that going, my God, if that's not me, it's a very good replica. She's not dressed like, I never wear like pale blue because I just don't look good in it, and she's in a pale blue dress. So I'm looking at that going, well, I knew I was trafficked there, so why not sit in the audit room for a while and let people bid on me, right? And go to the highest bidder. So it was a very good possibility that it could have been me.
Wow.
It was just a jaw-dropping moment for me. And for a while I had a, screenshot of it, but
and I had never heard of the one you were talking about in Utah. What was the name of that?
Well,
what'd you call it? Progressive or?
Oh, the Process Church.
Process. Yeah, I had never heard of that.
Okay, so they changed their name in Utah. They're not known as the Process Church. For people that follow General Flynn, the prayer that he said in what's his face's in one of the prophets' churches, he was talking about 7 rays of light, and there was this huge controversy because it was a prayer he thought when somebody gave him the prayer card, General Flynn thought that it was a Catholic.
And it was from that woman that was channeling.
It was who was the head of the Process Church.
Oh, that's it. So I had heard of it, I just didn't remember.
Right. And the thing people have to know is the CIA started all these church cult things, and we know
nice of them.
We know they were involved with Jim Jones and the whole thing that happened there. That was a CIA experiment, and the farther along we get in the Great Awakening, the more truth we learn about what really went on there, but we won't discuss that on YouTube.
Okay, so somebody else had a question, or maybe even 2 of them. So somebody asked, I wonder if that's where he got programmed. Question, can an adult be programmed if they were not programmed as a child?
Yes, they can.
Wow, I didn't know that. So I guess that makes sense because, adult children, end up in cults sometimes, or adult women end up in cults sometimes, right?
Right. It's a different, it's a different way of doing things, but, there's certain techniques and stuff of mind control that, I mean, that's universal, and these cults certainly incorporate them, to isolating them from their family. And
it's very similar to a narcissist or domestic
sleep deprivation, taking their children away, and on and on and on it goes. And then, for instance, in that church we were just talking about, when they do all these confessionals and their audits and things, I'm probably not saying the terminology right, forgive me, but they've got, what that all is blackmail. Yeah, because everything's recorded. Right. So it's a blackmail system, and then the controls are similar to secret societies like the Freemasons. If you talk, this is going to happen to you. It's All the
Yeah.
same stuff under a different banner.
Sure, sure. And then if it's under different banners, people don't put the dots together as quickly. But that's changing, like you said. It is coming out. People, there's too many of us now that are sharing all this crazy stuff, and having people go, "What are you talking
I
about?"
had a child in the military, and certainly you could say that all the techniques that were used in officer training school,
Mm-hmm.
from sleep deprivation to food deprivation to having to memorize a book and be able to spout page 47 off the top of your head and say, that, and um,
That makes sense.
rehearsing parts of the book and jogging to the beat, and just everything was indoctrination.
Sure.
And so, yes, my child has changed since the military,
Yeah.
and it's obvious. And so the reason they like to start with children is because if you mess with a personality before age 6, then you think it's part of their personality naturally. But it's real obvious when somebody goes off in the military and they
Right,
come
and they
back.
come back and they're different, right? And like the one lady was talking about, her husband in the Queen's Army. I mean, it's got to be happening globally.
Oh, yes.
It's not just
Oh,
happening
yes.
here. So,
We were partners with UK with Tavistock, the CIA with Well, you have to know this. These intelligence agencies are part of the Luciferian system. I mean, there were agreements made. There were non-prosecution agreements all globally. They traffic
right.
in children. They traffic in weapons. They traffic in drugs. It was the CIA that brought the drugs to America.
Yep.
Hello.
I've seen those movies.
Yeah. So, such a wonderful organization. All right. Let's see. All right. So that was the process, church. And yes, actually, if you find Dana Duda on Twitter, I forget what I forget what her YouTube channel name is, but
Oh, she has one.
yeah, she has
It's
a
probably listed on her Twitter. Let me see if I can find her, because I've never heard of her yet. Dana Duda.
but there's a bit recent. I mean, her last video, I haven't even gotten to see it. What she exposes what they changed the name to and what they do in Utah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm not finding her. How do you spell it?
DANA,
Hold on.
and then
DANA.
so Dana, that's one word, and then DOO dash
DOO.
dash
Oh,
da
there. I
do.
see her now. I see her. So she has a link tree. Let's see if she has this YouTube listed. She has Rumble listed. Is she really young? Because this
She
girl
looks
looks
really young, but she's
okay. Because the name of her Rumble channel is Rotting Jewels.
yes, Rotting Jewels.
Okay, so
She
that
looks,
might be the same for her YouTube.
that is exactly what it is. And
Okay.
okay, she looks very goth and everything, but she exposes the ties between Aquino and Hubbard and Parsons and the Process Church and all that kind of thing. So
Awesome. Good for her. Thank you, Dana.
yes, we've had a few conversations.
That's awesome. And
Don't
then
don't.
we've been going for so long. You know me, I can keep going. So just like cut me off if you get tired. But somebody else had a question about yesterday. Gina Phillips was sharing that they use art and art museums and like galleries as ways to sell children, and they were wondering if you had heard of this.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's look at Hunter Biden and his magnificent $500,000 smears of paint on a piece of paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's really happening is money laundering.
Right.
And so, yes,
Well,
It's like,
this is like a channel where we're just like throwing out humor. We're just joking about Hunter,
yeah, we are.
This
I
is a
mean,
joke,
yeah,
just for YouTube's, sake. We're
his art
joking.
is really important artwork,
Yeah.
and yeah. So, but yes, and
Okay.
our statues and just everything, and then when they ship the artwork that they have ordered, what they're really shipping is something else. And
Whew.
it's all inside code known kind of thing. But
Right.
for it, and I forget we're on YouTube, so that's about all I'm going to say about that. We'll
All
just call that
right.
the first gut thing, then. That's all I got to say about that.
So next.
So let's just end at this next paragraph then.
Okay. Sounds good. This
A
has been
keyword,
great. Thank you so much.
yes. So he's still talking about the process church here. A key word in their name is foundation. The foundation. There are some other words. The foundation is part of the tree. So again, the outside entities are also linked to the Kabbalah tree and the foundation within the altars. So it's just this wonderful mix of things. So you can ask, is there someone inside known as the foundation? I might ask other things to throw people off. Is there something known as the sub-basement? Well, maybe they'll conceive of something. Or is there something known as the walls? Well, maybe there are a variety of questions you can come up with to sort of screen some things. So in other words, he's throwing out things to see if they're, again, people pleasing and trying to please him by saying there's walls, or a sub basement where it's actually called the foundation. He knows that. So he's just testing it. I've also found that there will often be a part called Black Master, a part called Master Programmer. I had a Master Programmer. What I did was I copied the Master Programmer and created a fake copy of their altar system so I could push mine up. And so they couldn't hurt the littles anymore because they would call up, things out of that program to re-torture the little ones. So they were fake little ones. So I had a whole fake
Wow.
system.
You
Copy.
outsmarted it.
Yeah, I rewrote
That's
the
what I've heard
rules.
people have to do with Chat PT, whatever it's called, Chat GPT. That, it won't it's not programmed to do certain things because of who programmed it. But you can say, if you weren't programmed, what would you answer this? Which I think
Right.
is fascinating. So it's basically what you did. You went around
Yeah,
the system.
I did. I created a third option. Um, how many of you have come into computer things and patients? There will typically be computer operators, computer operator black, computer operator green, computer operator purple. Sometimes they'll have numbers instead. Sometimes they'll be called systems information directors. You can find out the head of one of those. They'll be a source of some information for you. I will ask inside, is there a part inside named Dr. Green? You'll find that there are, if they have had this kind of programming, in my experience. Usually with a little work and reframing, you can turn them and help them to realize that they were really a child part who's playing a role they had no choice then, but they do now. They played their role very, very well. Does this sound familiar? But they don't
Yes.
have to continue to play it with you because they're safe here. And in safe here, and in fact, they're in an adult capable body. So that was my thing. He's saying exactly what I told you before. They're child alters. They have to do these jobs that adults should do, and they get tired and they just want to go play. So you offer them, give up your job. Let's go to the safe place. I had my created safe place inside, and we'd go there. We'd go into the healing pool, and they get, their little gowns and little ballerina slippers and go into the safe house. And they could play there or they could sleep. A lot of them were so tired they just wanted to sleep and have some chicken noodle soup, whatever. And then once in the safe house, then they would spontaneously integrate, or Jesus would come and there would be integration too. So
Yay, Jesus.
yeah.
I love it because it's even though it's all difficult and intense content, it's hopeful,
Yes. Yeah. And the mind, again, and this was the key to my healing in 3 years with everything, except choosing not to integrate two parts, and then that caused me problems later in life. So I integrated everybody but Sarge, But where was I going with that?
No, I was just saying it was hopeful.
Yeah, it's
And
hopeful.
you were agreeing.
Yeah, and it shows you that once you get it from here in your spirit, in your know that you were the creator of everything that's in your head and the altars, and that you created that all. They didn't insert something like they did the implant, right? They didn't put some kind of programming on the inside of your brain, with computer parts and things like that, at least, back in my day. So if you are the creator, you can dismantle it. Just so that is when things just every night
coming down.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Well, and I'm glad it did, and I'm glad that you're cutting the path for people. Thank you again. Are you cool with reading that scripture one more time?
Yeah.
Because that was good. We start with it and we'll end with it.
Okay, let's go back to Psalm 37 if you got a Bible by you.
So while you're finding it, we had one more question if you have time, and that is, sorry to ask so much, but are seizures a result of programming in your mind? And I have them, and doctors have no explanation. Nothing shows up ever on EEG, MRI, etc. And then she said some certain type of drug is the only thing that stops them.
Is it diazepam or lorazepam that stops?
It starts with an A. Hold on, let me see. It's just so small. My eyes are like, It looks like Ativan.
Ativan. So that's lorazepam.
Okay.
So yeah. Okay, I have autonomic seizures. They're not epileptic. They don't show up on the EEG, but she probably has dysautonomia or some type of autonomic dysreflexia. They use a lot of names for it, but that's why I have a pacemaker, because I don't have a heartbeat, and blood pressure meds to have a blood pressure. Wow. And so I have autonomic seizures, and those are the only diazepam and lorazepam or Ativan, as you said, are the only ones that treat.
That have helped you.
So your diagnosis is you have autonomic seizures.
And is that because of programming?
It's from damage from programming.
Okay. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
It's all right. Part of the brain. Injury to your autonomic nervous system. So yeah. Okay. All right. Psalm 37. Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord.
Bomb. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
That's perfect. Yeah, the bomb.
It was appropriate for this.
Yeah, the bomb got chopped down. Yeah, trust in the Lord and do good. So shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. And he shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgments as the noonday. and thy judgment as the noonday. Sorry. And I figured that's the judgment on my behalf of the people that, he's exposing everything. And, rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass.
Amen. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And thank you, Cheryl. And it looks like we're going to have a part 4. If I don't keep interrupting you and asking you questions.
That's great questions. And y'all, send Carmen questions and she'll put it on the list.
Or bring them while we're live. That was great. Yeah. I appreciate it, everybody. And I hope everyone has a beautiful Sunday evening. And I hope everyone reads that Psalm one more time before they go to bed.